So we talked about Nietzsche and how he declared the idea of the death of God, and he meant by that not physically the death of God. It's the death of the traditional way of thinking of God. Okay, he was referring to the different religions and the way people and thinkers used to think about the definition of God. So he discussed the idea of nihilism as opposed to existentialism, as we said. Now, his life was cut because of illness, but his thoughts and ideas inspired lots of debates through all over the world. Okay, so let's now see more details about Friedrich Nietzsche. This is how it's written. He is a German, as he said, philosopher. And you can see that he is contemporary one, and he discussed, or he was one of the cultural critiques. Okay, what's cultural critique? النقد الثقافي. It's he takes, for example, or he studies different cultures. Okay, and he tries to make kind of criticism on the culture itself from points of views, social, and also all the other, let's say, overlapping ideas that has to be sometimes social or cultural according to the cultural theory. So his criticism is simply part of what is called self-consciousness. So he criticizes, sorry, according to his self-consciousness. It's the way he recognizes things. He defends from his point of view the way a culture should be thought of. Okay, very complicated ideas. Cultural criticism is very important for people who study, for example, history of many civilizations. When you talk about civilizations, for example, so this is it. Intellectual history. It is contemporary philosophy that was present through history in Western philosophy, and that was in the 20th century, as I told you. This is why it's contemporary, and it works on analytical thinking and what is called continental philosophy. Now, also he is supposed to be a composer, poet, also, and a writer. And I don't know if you heard about his name in translations into English. And he was one of those who studied language, which is called philology, which is an oral and written historical sources of language. And he referred to what is called textual criticism, or intersection of textual criticism, which is part of dealing with literary criticism and history and criticism of history and even linguistics. So that was his main, let's say, discipline. He was one of the very well-known philosophers in what is called Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. And he was the one to study all thoughts, including Marx and Freud. And you know, Marx and Freud, we'll talk later, maybe if we have time, about Marx, who is a communist philosopher, or Shiyu'i, philosopher Shiyu'i, and Freud, who is one of the very known philosophers and psychologists in the field, who were discussing, who used to both of them were discussing criticism and cultural criticism, same as Nietzsche did. Okay, and they were against what is called, they were suspicious of what is called historical values or traditional values. So he was the one to refuse accepting things without criticism, and this is why it is called cultural criticism, which is critique, as I told you, of culture and civilizations and many civilizations. Now, you can see also the different dimensions of German nationalism. He was supposed to be one of the national philosophers, and some people even thought of him as opposed to anti-Semitism and nationalism. And they thought of him when they talk about fascism and Nazism. Now, what's fascism? Al-Fasciyya, which is a form of far-right authoritarian, so it is authoritarian, al-tasalluti, okay, and ultranationalism, which is السيطرة على أكثر من دولة, so توسعية, let's say. So it's kind of dictatorship, okay? Dictatorship and suppression used against whoever do not accept fascism. And that was the style of movement that was at that time in Egypt, in Germany and in Europe in 20th century. And that was the beginning of what is called Nazism and Nazia, which is a common name of in English for National Socialism, الاشتراكية القومية, okay, الاشتراكية القومية. So they believed in socialism. Socialism, it's the beginning of communism, which is opposite to liberalism and democracy. Here they do not accept democracy. They do not give liberties enough freedom to people to express themselves, to express their opinions. It's dictatorship mainly, but it is it's not only national as Nazism is. They also think of it as ultra national. So it is the German way of thinking of nationalism. You know that German Nazism spread all over Europe, and that was a very dictator way of authority. And Germans speaking of it as a nation state, الدولة القطرية, they call it in Arabic. German nationalism emphasizes and takes pride in national identity of Germans. You see, that's the main idea. And we have also nationalism or Nazism as one of the very continental philosophies. So they refer to this philosophy as governing all over the continent, not only in German. سيطرت على كل المقاطعات أو كل العالم through Europe, beginning with Europe, okay? And you know all the wars that were because of Nazism, and that was, in a way, sometimes they used to think of it in the era of existentialism, الوجودية, and they call it postmodernism and post-structuralism, يعني ما بعد الحداثة. In philosophy and in literature, and he used to be known as one of the main founders of criticism in culture, in politics, and also in psychology. And by the way, his way of thinking and definition of cognition and thinking of himself, his self-image and self-understanding of himself and the world and God and so on, and made him say that German people are more elite, let's say, العرق الجرماني, as if it is more elite, نخبة, okay, العرق الصافي أو خلينا نقول الجرماني. And they used to think of what is called, because of him we have what is called the Superman. the idea that you can see in films Superman, that is because of the way they used to think of him and dictatorship as man who can do everything. It's like, to him, it's like infinite God. Okay, that's the idea he used to believe in. Of course, he talked about citizenship and nationality and ethnicity, and he discussed all ideas concerning eternal return. Now, what about the death of, this is the word nihilism, you see? Let's see the death of God and nihilism. This is the word, okay, nihilism. Now, God is dead. That is, now this is a quotation from him, okay? He said, God is dead is a widely quoted statement made by German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. He kept on repeating that, and he used the phrase to express the idea that enlightenment has eliminated the possibility of the existence of God. So he said that because of enlightenment of the mind and people, the possibility of the existence of God is not there anymore. So as if he was affected by development and scientific development and enlightenment, but in a way that was not taking the idea of God seriously. So he was skeptic in a way, and he and his proponents were of one of the strongest forms of what is called the death of God theology. Theology, as theology is lahut. Okay, so he didn't deal with that, with the idea of God as the way theologists wanted to or tend to believe in. And that made him talk or go to another idea, which is nihilism. And nihilism is, as I said, is philosophy. It's kind of philosophy, and sometimes it's part of many different branches or views within the philosophy itself that expresses the idea that some form of negation toward life, negation, which is not, if you have positiveness and negation of life. So different ways of thinking of life, الوجود والعدم, okay? He talked about fundamental concepts like, for example, knowledge, like all other philosophers studied that, for example, like Plato. Knowledge, existence, and what is the meaning of life. They were the main questions that he discussed and studied, and that made him end in answering the three main disciplines on knowledge, existence, and life as to end with what is called nihilism. So that position made him think that human values are baseless, and that life is meaningless. And here came the idea of the God is dead. So that was the unfortunately the way he understood life and knowledge, and the way he thought of it. So he was also very pessimistic. This is why when he talks about negation of life, negation of the world, and negation of fundamental concepts, no knowledge, no existence, no life. Okay, that's pessimism in a way. And also he referred to he was thought of as similar to Western Buddhism, who tend to advocate separating oneself from the will of God, and thinking of oneself as full of power, and kind of in a way, so not accepting any kind of religion to be thought of. I will stop here, and please take a break, okay?